Hello noble ones, welcome back to my channel. This is the Metatron speaking. As per the title of this video, today we are talking about Celtic ethnogenesis. This is the fourth episode of an ongoing series on the origins of several people and cultures. As you can see, these are the other three episodes and you'll find links in the description below. Today's topic, compared to the other three, is more nuanced than you would think. With that being said, if there is any specific civilization/people that you'd like me to dedicate an episode on within this series, let me know in the comments below. Now let's dive in. The first thing we need to do for our comprehensive analysis, to be precise, is to establish a common understanding of the word Celt, Celtic, because there are at least three different ways in which this word is commonly used. The first usage is linguistic. In other words, the Celts are people speaking Indo-European Celtic languages, such as Gaulish, Celtiberian, Lepontic, Insular Celtic, etc. The second usage is archaeological, Celts being groups associated with the Hallstatt and Tène material cultures of Iron Age temperate Europe. Last but not least, the third is using Celt as an ethnonymic. This is a historical frame of reference and it indicates the peoples whom Greek and Roman authors called Keltoí, Celtae. And as we read the authors, these are usually identified as populations living in Transalpine Gaul, parts of Iberia, northern Italy, and the like. As a simple initial definition, we could say that the Celts are a series of different European people, at least in their later form, interconnected by a common cultural denominator. Whenever we use the term Celtic as an umbrella term, we are connecting different people, different tribes, with similar linguistic aspects, which we will dive into towards the end of the video briefly, but most importantly, cultural ones. And when we say culture, we also include the ritualistic aspects of common religious beliefs. Just to give you a frame of reference, it would be a bit like saying Germanic. That includes many different cultures that have common linguistic aspects and organizational characteristics. Likewise, it's a bit like saying Mediterranean cultures when you are connecting different people, although they all have a common denominator. Now, given these are not perfectly interchangeable, because at the end of the day there is an extra step of connectivity when we talk about Celts, which is one of the reasons why it leads to all sorts of different academic discourses and debates as to whether or not maybe these people were more connected than we think, and this will go into a discussion about their ethnicity and phenotypic traits. The reality is that the ever-increasing expansion of the Celtic archetype all over continental and insular realities is a fact. But if we were to go back in time, what would be the very core of the initial Celtic stratus? In approximately 600 BC, Greek settlers living in Massilia, modern-day Marseille, France, used the term Keltoí to describe the inhabitants of the Provence region. The Romans later adapted this Greek word into Latin as Celtae, Celts, and applied it broadly to all people living north of Provence, extending it into the Alpine regions. Several ancient references require classification regarding Celtic identity. The Ister was the historical name for what we now call the Danube River. The Senasians represented a distinct group from the Iberian Peninsula, whom Herodotus did not classify as Celtic people. Herodotus mentions a city called Pyrene, which remains archaeologically unidentified as the starting point of the Danube. This reference could indicate either the river's actual source in Germany's Black Forests, or possibly a coastal settlement near the Black Sea in present-day Bulgaria, where the river reaches its mouth. Roman classification systems didn't group Belgians and Germanic tribes with Celtic people. Similarly, when Romans encountered populations in Britain, they maintained distinct categories for the island's various inhabitants, rather than labeling them all as Celts. Let's first try and map a nucleus of Celtic ethnogenesis using the words of the ancients. Let's begin with Julius Caesar, or Julius Caesar. We'll be reading from Commentari de Bello Gallico, where he describes various tribes as he distinguishes the Celts from Germanic tribes. In Book 1, we read, Latin provided above, all Gaul is divided into three parts, one of which the Belgae inhabit, another the Aquitani, and the third, those who, in their own language, are called Celtae, in our language, Galli. So focusing on this part very quickly. Tertiam, a third type of people, qui ipsorum lingua Celtae. So in their language are called Celtae. Of course, this is a Latinization of it. Nostra, Hours, in hours, of course, understood by context. Lingua, so language. Galli, Gauls, appellantur. We call them. Now, this passage is significant because, at least in the mind of Julius Caesar, who is a high witness and a man who directly came into contact with several populations of the area of Western and Central Europe, he specifically connects the Celts with the Gauls, telling us these are the Celts. Another author who not only mentions the Celts but also gives us a description to help us visualize these people is Diodorus Siculus. In his Bibliotheca Historia 528 1-3, he says, open quotes, "The Gauls are tall of body, with rippling muscles and white of skin, and their hair is blonde, for they are always washing their hair in lime water." Furthermore, in a later passage, he also tells us that their women are as large as the men, and their children are born with greyish hair, which darkens to match their parents as they age. On top of this, he also tells us that the Celts tend to shave their face, exception being their moustache, which they let grow. This is an interesting area of comparison here. Caesar hardly describes the physical appearance of the Gauls, focusing mostly on their social structure and military practices. In contrast, Caesar does provide physical description of the Britons. He tells us, open quotes, "All the Britons dye themselves with woad, which produces a bluish color. They wear their hair long and shave every part of the body, except the head and upper lip." Close quotes. Strabo in Geographica 4.2 and 4.5.2, written between 7 BC and 23 Anno Domini, gives us more explicit physical traits, particularly when he compares Britons and Gauls. Open quotes, "The Britons are taller than the Kelti and not so yellow-haired, although they are less strong in build." Close quotes. So indirectly, we have another mention of blonde hair being a characteristic of Celts. Here is a three-way comparison table of the three authors, their physical descriptions, and areas of overlap. Polybius also gives us a physical description, as he is specifically talking about a contingent of Gaesatae. He tells us that the Celts of North Italy wore trousers and cloaks, but the Gaesatae fought naked. And at the Battle of Cannae, 216 BC, Polybius describes the naked Celts and the Iberians with their short linen tunics with purple borders, and Livy speaks of the Gauls naked from the navel up, and on the Iberians with dazzlingly white tunics bordered with purple. Similarly, the Celts in Asia Minor, who we believe have preserved this custom, are described as naked in battle, with skin white because they were never exposed in exempt in battle. Note how Dionysius of Halicarnassus also expressing long hair as a characteristic of these tribes. Worth of note that Tacitus, whenever he discusses and compares the Celts and the Britons, keeping in mind that he never refers to the Britons as Celts, even though we do know that they were Celtic at least through a current linguistic analysis, he tells us that while the Caledoni in modern-day Scotland, strongly built and with red hair, he also mentions the Silures with tanned complexion and curly hair. If you like this video, please consider getting one of my plushies. It really helps supporting the production of more complex and deeply researched videos. There are only a few days left, so please consider getting yours today. Thank you for your support. Of course, while we talk about common phenotypic traits among Celtic populations, we also have to underline that in their height during the Iron Age, these Celtic realities had dominated 3/4 of Europe, which means that even though these would be typical elements, at least in the eyes of the Mediterraneans, to describe a Celt, the reality is that there would have been a certain level of differentiation among these people. We shouldn't imagine a single phenotypic trait to be absolute in such a large geographic area. The extension and success of such population clusters has to do with significant advances in agrarian, metallurgical, architectural, and economic substrata, allowing them to extend their influence over large spans of land.